This program is brought to you by the following proud sponsors. The Alltech Media Group, the region's leading multimedia video production and marketing company, creating powerful and innovative marketing strategies that deliver exponential returns. And by California CEO Online Video Business Magazine, providing California's executives and regional leaders with economic development resources and regional branding solutions. And by StudioCast Pros, taking your web branding strategies to a new level by creating world-class online programs proven to engage audiences and enhance profits.
Welcome to 1 Million Cups Riverside. My name's Jay Goth. I'm one of the co-organizers, and today I'm going to talk about something that's near and dear to every entrepreneur's heart. That's getting money, getting funding from investors. And so I've designed a little presentation through TriTech Small Business Development Center called What Angels Want. And basically what I'm doing is going through a template of a presentation that shows you what needs to be included in your presentation to investors and why it's important to them. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, your presentation should be very concise. It shouldn't be long and elaborate. Most entrepreneurs love their business and they want to tell investors everything about their business, when investors really want to know a couple of major points. So that's what we're going to have in these slides, are the major points that investors want to hear. They don't want to see 20 slides of how intricate you have designed your baby. They just want to know that your baby's going to sell and that they're going to be able to make money. So you want no jargon. I know there are a lot of technology startups. They use buzzwords all the time. You got to keep those out. You got to consider that you're talking to an elementary school person. Really keep it simple. If you try and get too elaborate, you're just going to confuse them. And I'll tell you one thing, and a confused investor never does, is write a check. So the very first thing that you need to do is give them a title slide, very briefly tell them who you are, who your company is, and you want to have your contact info on the slide, but you don't want to mention it during your presentation. The very next slide should be something about the problem that you're overcoming. Investors love getting involved with companies that are solving a big problem. If you're not solving a problem and you're just inventing a better mousetrap, your odds of catching an investor's attention go down significantly. And there are several things that investors want to know. What problem are you solving? Are you a solution looking for a problem? What I mean by that is a lot of people come up with something and it doesn't really address a need in the market, but they think it's really cool. So they try and get investors to see a problem that really doesn't exist, and the investors will see through that. So don't try and be the mousetrap looking for a mouse to catch. Be the mousetrap that has a big mouse problem. And then if it's a world changer, that really gets their attention. So obviously something to do with the environment, a new technology, something disruptive, a new medical breakthrough. Those are the kind of things that investors really like to sink their teeth into. The solution to the problem is your baby. You want it very simple, and you want to tell them how it solves the problem. A lot of times people get off on a tangent talking about what their product is, and they never really talk about how it solves the problem. And they want to know why you can help the world or society or whatever you're trying to help, or a certain niche. It doesn't have to be an overarching thing. It just needs to be a specific problem that you have a solution to. The next part of the puzzle is, how do you make money? It could be the best idea in the world, but if there's not a way to make money, the investors aren't going to want to invest because they're putting money into a project to get money out. If it is something that's philanthropical, there's nothing wrong with that, but you definitely want to go for grants, or you're going in a different direction. That's not an investor pitch. That's more of a grant or philanthropic pitch. You need to keep it simple, and I always say that graphics are a lot better. Generally, I see a lot of slide decks that have a whole bunch of words on them, and you want to stay away from that. You really want to go to a slide deck that's very simple, bullet points like this, and graphics are always better. They say a picture tells 1,000 words. You want the audience looking to you and listening to what you have to say. You don't want them trying to read a slide while you're talking, because then their attention's unfocused, and again, you're leading to confusion. They won't get the main points that you want to make. And basically, the question you're solving is, how do you do what you say you can do? Every entrepreneur should have some secret sauce. Sometimes it's the management team, sometimes it's the technology itself, sometimes it's the unique solution to a problem that nobody's ever thought of before. But people want to know why you and not somebody else. And so you've got to differentiate yourself. And the key thing is you need to know who your customer is, how you're going to reach them, how you're going to get them to spend money. So you need to have a very simple slide on your marketing and sales approach, because no matter how great your technology is, if nobody buys it, the investor is not going to make money. And so, we have an old saying in the industry, will the dog eat the dog food? If you put a product out there and you don't get any buyers, maybe you have a freemium product. That's a very popular method of going to market. So you give everyone something for free. If you can't convert them into paying customers, you don't have a viable business model. The next thing is, who's your competition? And a lot of entrepreneurs make a big mistake. They'll stand up in front of an investor or a group of investors and they'll say, we don't have any competition. Well, the fact is, everyone has competition. If you haven't found your competition yet, that's just because you don't know about them. But there is somebody in the world thinking the same thing you're thinking about the same problem you're trying to address. And there is competition out there. And one of the things that I like to see in a competition slide is, if you have a number of advantages over your competition, if you put a simple grid together and you list all the features and benefits that are most important to your customers, and you meet most of those criteria and the other ones have big gaps, that's an easy graphic way for you to show the investor how you're better than everyone else. If you have intellectual property, say a patent or something like that, now's the time to tell them about that, because that's something that can keep them from entering your market. It's called a barrier to entry, and investors love barriers to entry. Personally, I think a lot of times barriers to entry are kind of overblown, but I know that investors love them, so you want to tailor your pitch to what the investor wants, not to what you believe. The key about your team, it doesn't have to be complete. You don't have to have everybody on your team already. In most cases, when you're a startup, it's 1 or 2 people, and you know what holes you're going to need to fill, but you need some funding to fill the holes, or you need some good referrals to get to the people that you need to bring on board. So what the investor wants to know is that you've thought this out. You've figured out that you do have holes. And usually investors are very anxious to help you fill your team because they have a Rolodex. When you're looking for an investor, you're not just looking for money. You're looking for access to the contacts they have, the industry connections, the possible people who would want to be on your team. So you want to tell them why each person, your bios shouldn't be, they did this, they did that, they did this, they did that. That's not the important thing. The important thing is, what did they do in their past that makes them so important to your team today? That's the important part of how you've built your team. Every investor wants to get an idea of what your numbers look like. They're not going to believe your numbers, believe me, because most numbers are pie in the sky. As startups, we always have to start somewhere. We have to say, well, if we can sell this widget for this much, and we can sell this many widgets in year 1, and this many in year 2, and this many in year 3, and it's going to cost us this much to build a widget, you can come up with a very basic pro forma over 5 years that'll tell them what you expect to receive in revenue, what you expect your costs will be, and what your net profit will be. Usually investors like to see a hockey stick, so they don't mind seeing a slow growth curve the first couple years, but then as things pick up, they do like to see that little zoom up in revenue. And believe me, investors are always going to knock your numbers down. The one thing you don't want to do when you're presenting this slide is say, we have come up with some very conservative projections. Investors hate the word conservative. To them, that's a big red flag, because obviously you think it's conservative, and obviously they think you're wildly optimistic. So basically what you want to do is say, based upon the research we've done, these are the numbers that we think we can hit. Okay? So basically they just want to know that you can make money, because if you're not going to make money, they're not going to make money. And if they're not going to make money, they're not going to invest. Now, depending on how you're presenting, you're going to want to have a deal slide. And a deal slide is simply, what you think your company's worth today, what you're willing to give up for the amount of money you're looking for, and most importantly, what a lot of people forget to put on this slide is where the money's going to go. Because if they're going to write you a check for $250,000 and you've got a salesman at the Mercedes dealership waiting for you to make your deposit, that's not a good use of funds. That's not what they're looking for. They're looking for you to put the money into legal, accounting, marketing, hiring. You have to have that all thought out. And then ultimately, they're going to want to know what your exit strategy is. So for most startups, your exit strategy is going to be some kind of acquisition. We're going to grow it to this level. At that point, we think our valuation based upon our revenue projections will be X, and we expect to sell the company at that point. So that gives the investor a way that they can put it into their head and do their calculations, which say, okay, if I put in X amount and I'm going to get Y equity, and we're going to sell at Z, then I'm going to get A. So you want them to be able, you don't build that model for them, just give them the information they need to come up with their own calculations, because you don't want to paint a picture and have it be something completely different from what they're thinking. You want them to build the picture, and then in a later presentation or meeting, they can tell you what they think the picture is. A lot of times, if you're in a big public event, like we have a Tech Coast Angels pitch competition next week, if you're going in front of the public, you don't want this slide in your deck, because what that does is it triggers something called general solicitation rules. I'm not going to go into the specifics, but basically if you tell people you're looking for money in public, you're generally soliciting. What that means to the SEC and the regulators is that you are making a public offering of your private company, which is allowed, but in order to do that, you have to file with the SEC at least 15 business days ahead of time, which means if you do that and you haven't filed, you're in violation. You don't want to be doing that. So I would say keep this slide out of your deck if you're not in a room of only investors. So the next steps after you give your quick presentation, as you can see, it's not very long. It's very simple, very concise. It gives them the points. What you're trying to do is whet their appetite. They're not going to write you a check the very first time you get in front of them. What they want to do is get that trigger in their brain that says, I like this, I can see myself being involved. If you have a room of 10 investors, the odds are maybe 2 or 3 of them will be interested. If you watch Shark Tank, a lot of times the people will present, I'm out, but there's always one guy who says, this looks interesting, let me dive in a little more. That's what you want to do, is find the guy or lady who says, I want to know a little bit more. And you want to get the next meeting. The key to getting the money is being prepared. So that's a whole nother subject. It involves how do you prepare for an investor's due diligence. It's a very, very tedious and time-consuming effort, but it'll pay off if you do the work ahead of time. You don't want to be scrambling. When you get somebody who's ready to write you a check and says, I need to see this, 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 and this, and you don't have any of it, you just aren't prepared, and then you don't look ready to the investor, and a lot of times it'll turn an investor off. So you want to have your due diligence package prepared ahead of time, and basically you want to get the money. So that's a quick and concise overview of what an investor wants to see. I'm happy to take any questions.
Jay, you always have to have an exit strategy for what your plan is, because a lot of entrepreneurs want this to be the business that they're going to work in for years to come, does there always have to be an exit strategy?
Well, if you're an entrepreneur who's building a business that you want to be in for years to come, the investor's going to say, well, that's great for you, but how am I going to get out? So there's got to be an exit strategy for the investor. In some cases, if you're building a business and you've got a compelling strategy and a really great idea, then maybe the investor will say, okay, I'll invest in it, but I need some kind of exit strategy for myself. And you can say, okay, I'll agree to buy, well, if we don't have an acquisition or some other liquidity event for you within 5 to 7 years, then as long as, the company's doing well, we'll agree to buy back your stock at X times what you paid for it. But they need an exit strategy. And generally, they're not going to invest in a lifestyle company. They're looking for somebody who wants to build something big, sell it, or go IPO. And if you're going to go big, IPO's a good way to go.
No, Jay, great presentation. I learned a lot. My question is, I know that the financial piece and what's in it for me is probably one of the most important aspects of what you presented. What else, as a presenter, would you think the person should focus on to generate the most interest from the audience?
I had a great mentor when I was raising money, because I've done a lot of money raising in my life. And he always said, what you want to do is you want to paint a picture and you want to let the investor put themselves into the picture. So you don't want to spell out what's in it for them so much as you want to paint a picture that's so pretty that they want to be in the picture, which means you want to create an environment, a situation that looks so rosy that they're thinking to themselves, how can I be involved in this? And a lot of times, I'll tell you right now, if you go into a venture capitalist or you're going one-on-one with an angel investor, it's not going to be a presentation like this. You may get into slide 1 and they're going to start asking you questions, and it's going to be more give and take. And so at that point, what you want to do is you want to answer their questions in a way that is very simple. One of the biggest mistakes I see entrepreneurs make when they get into this situation, and it can be a deal killer, is the investor will ask a very simple question and the entrepreneur will spend 15 minutes telling them everything but the answer to that question. So what I recommend is always try to get to the heart of their question quickly, and always ask a question to them at the end of your answer. So if they say, how did you come up with this revenue number? You very quickly say, okay, we're going to sell X number of things in month 1, X number of things in month 2. We have a marketing plan designed to build us up. And I think, the revenue numbers are justified based upon this marketing plan. Would you agree that that looks reasonable? And the reason that you ask that question is you're trying to get a conversation going at this point. You're past the presentation stage. Now you're talking. And you want to keep them involved, because when they disengage, when they start looking at their cell phone and texting, saying I'm going to be late for lunch or something, then you've lost them. And you don't want them checking out. So you always want them engaged. So that's why I recommend that you come up with something. Test the waters. Don't be shy. Say, is this something that you can see yourself being a part of? Ask those questions. It's the most uncomfortable part. And another thing that I see people do time and again is they'll ask that question and they don't give the guy time to answer. They just start talking because they're so worried. I sold a lot of investments over the telephone. And when I ask my closing question is, so what do you think? Are you going to get involved or not? Do you want me to have FedEx show up at your door tomorrow? A lot of times I would not say anything and they wouldn't say anything, because they'd expect me to say, this is going to be a great deal and you really want to get in. They want me to sell them. I don't want to sell them. It's time for them to figure it out. Are you in or are you out? I've sat on the phone with a dead phone line for 30 seconds to 2 minutes. It's the longest time of your life, because you're just sitting there going, oh my God, are you still alive? But actually, the fact of the matter is, the person who speaks first in that situation capitulates. And you definitely want it to be him. You don't want it to be yourself. If it goes on to 2 or 3 minutes and it's getting ridiculous, then you need to say, well, guess what, Mr. Brown? I understand that you can't make up your mind. I think I've given you enough information. There could be any number of factors involved. What's keeping you from making the decision? And at that point, if they don't answer or they start prevaricating and start telling stories or try to obfuscate, then I just say, thank you very much for your time. You're obviously not qualified. Have a good day. Yes?
The other question I have, Jay, is I know a lot of people that present have technical products and technical companies. But this seems like it's more of a sales presentation. Would you recommend that someone, does Toastmasters or invests in presentation skills training to help them with their presentation?
Absolutely. One of the keys is nobody's great in the beginning. We used to call it marbles in your mouth. When we hire guys to get on the phone and sell, their first 2 weeks are terrible. They're tripping over themselves, they're stuttering, they're getting flustered and flushed, especially if the investor expresses interest. Then all of a sudden they're just like, they don't know what to do. So the more you do it, the easier it becomes. I'm an introvert. I'm a very shy person. I used to hate public speaking. But once I started doing it, now I love it. So it's just practice.
How do you deal with gaps in your presentation? As you're putting your presentation together, some of the information you might want to present, maybe it doesn't exist yet. You can try your best to imagine what it would be, or is there some better way that you can address things? Like, for example, gaps in your team. If you're a small team and you're going to need to have this person and that person and some other person in your team, the investor is going to sense that. How do you address that in your presentation?
If you know that there's somebody missing in your team, you can just put a title next to a question mark and just say, we haven't identified this person yet and we're looking for help from our community of investors or whatever. If it's a technology thing, and there are so many technologies that you develop and you've got 80% of it done, but there's that key 20% that you haven't finished, you want to address that. Because you don't want them thinking that you're already done soup to nuts, and then you get the money and you say, oh, by the way, we still have to develop this. So what I believe is honesty is the best policy. So what I would do is say, we're 80% there, but there's this missing component, and we're going to need help with that. And if you know somebody, usually one of the things that I should have said at the very beginning is you don't want to go out to every Tom, Dick, and Harry investor. You want to research the investors just as much as they want to research you. So what I recommend is you find investors who invest in your space, your industry, and then you find deals that they've done that are similar to what you're doing. So you can draw a comparison of what you're doing today to something that they've already invested in. Then they have a reason to listen to you. The hardest thing to do with an investor is to get their attention. You want to get a referral in, that's the easiest way, but if you're cold calling, if you know something about them and what they've done before and what their sweet spot is and what they've invested, then they appreciate the fact that you're not just another guy wasting their time. You're somebody who's actually done your due diligence on them, and you're somebody who's come prepared. They like that. That may give you the in that you need to talk to them. So always be honest. Don't try and hide anything. If you see something that's critical to your success that's missing, say this is one of the key parts that we need to develop.
I was going to ask, at what point do you even decide or determine that you're ready to get in front of investors? Like at what point in your business development?
That's a good question, because I see a lot of people go out and start talking to investors before they're ready, and you never get a second chance, because once they say they've seen you, they've seen you. So I recommend that you work with somebody who's been through the process before. I really recommend mentorship of some type. Obviously, TriTech is a small business development center. We help companies prepare for this and help them develop pitch decks. That's part of what we do. But you also have SCORE And then you have the local business community. Look for somebody who's been successful. For example, if you wanted to retail bicycles, we have a gentleman here in Riverside, Mike Cachet, who owns a great bicycle company. He started when he was 16 years old. He's now doing about $35 million a year in business. And he loves talking to people about how he built his business. So you find somebody like that. There are a lot of potential mentors out there. But to answer your question, you should talk to somebody who's been through the process and show them what you have and ask them if they think you're investor ready. And if they say, no, you need some more work, usually they'll help you either develop the plan or guide you to somebody who can help you. Well, thanks everybody. I hope you have a great day. It's Million Cups Wednesday, and we'll have another speaker in just a minute.
This program was brought to you by the following proud sponsors: the Alltech Media Group, the region's leading multimedia video production and marketing company, creating powerful and innovative marketing strategies that deliver exponential returns. And by California CEO Online Video Business Magazine, providing California's executives and regional leaders with economic development resources and regional branding solutions. And by StudioCast Pros, taking your web branding strategies to a new level by creating world-class online programs proven to engage audiences and enhance profits.